Hello.
Hello, and welcome to Planet Word. Step up to the mic and say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yo.
Hi there.
You're standing in front of about 1,000 words. And that's not even 1% of the entire English language.
Adventures in Wonderland have captivated audiences for generations. Off with their heads! Oh dear, I shall be late!
In this best-selling new kind of cookbook, Chef Samin Nasrat has taken the sprawling, daunting, multicultural subject we call cooking.
Everything's a wheel, turning and turning, never stopping.
The frogs is part of it, and the bugs, and the fish, and the wood thrush, too, and people.
All this wordplay gives the song an unpredictable vibe, exactly like a schoolyard where everybody is up to something.
What did the tailor think of her new job? It was so-so.
No.
Oh, come
that
on.
was not
Come on.
close to funny.
A little laugh.
Tonight, there is not a liberal America and a conservative America.
There is the United States of America.
If you use words to attack, you're turning words into a weapon. It's easy to forget about how much power words hold.
Salam alaikum.
Xin chào.
Merhaba.
Hello.
Hola. I speak Arabic.
I speak Icelandic.
I speak Amharic.
Hindi. Korean.
Hawaiian.
Farsi. And I speak Hebrew.
Shalom.
Shalom. I'm not.
In Korean, we have 7 different levels of respect.
Navajo has a totally different...
Our culture is one of the oldest in the world.
Zulu is a clique language.
My great-grandpa was the last speaker, but our language lives on in the names of places around D.C.
Thank you for learning about my language.
To say goodbye, we say Slomlath.
Ciao.
Agur.
再见.
Bless, bless.
Hagoene.
Paalam.
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's In Conversation With. I am Janet McCarthy Grimm, president of the New York Book Forum, and we are delighted to welcome Ann B. Friedman this evening. She is the founder and CEO of Planet Word in Washington, D.C. In addition to being the founder and CEO of Planet Word, she is also the developer of the restoration of the historic Franklin School in Washington, where the museum is housed. She has a long career in language, words, and the arts, and began by teaching beginning reading and writing for 9 years in the Montgomery County Public School system. From 2010 to 2016, Ann was the chair of the board of SEED Foundation, a parent body of nation's only public inner-city college prep boarding schools. She is currently their vice chair. She's also the new director of the American Alliance of Museums and is the founding board member of Downtown DC. She serves also on the board of the Aspen Music Festival and School and is on the board of the National Symphony Orchestra. It's amazing she had enough time to start a museum. She lives in Bethesda, Maryland with her husband, Thomas J. Friedman, the notable New York Times foreign affairs columnist and an author. They have 2 grown daughters. Ann, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I believe your plan is to open by going through a few slides and telling us a little bit about the origin of the school, of the Franklin School and the museum. And then we will get back together for questions and answers.
I'd be happy to. Thank you for inviting me to speak and tell you about Planet Word. So maybe in answer to your introduction, so I'm not a very good board member anymore since I started working on founding Planet Word, but it's important to be part of the community and to give back. So I keep volunteering. So what happened was that I became a teacher relatively late in life. I was 44 when I started teaching 5th grade, and then eventually became a reading and writing teacher in 1st grade because that was a part-time position, and it fit a lot better with my personal life and being married to Tom and having 2, at that time, teenage daughters. And so I found this job in Montgomery County where they hired extra teachers just to teach reading and writing to 1st and 2nd graders. And it was the greatest teaching job I ever had. I just loved doing that. I loved seeing kids' eyes light up because I was the teacher who was introducing them to literature and poetry, all sorts of concepts, and it was the first time. So, you know, you had kids who would tell you, I love poetry, you know, just music to your ears as a teacher. So then I retired in 2011, and I wasn't ready to leave literacy behind. I thought it was so important and so fun. So I was looking around for something to do, and then I read this New York Times article about a new museum of mathematics in New York City that was bringing math concepts to life by using a lot of technology, and that's MoMath. For those of you who are listening and from New York, it's a great museum, and I became friendly with the founders, and my idea was, well, if you can bring abstract concepts of math to life, why not try that with language and words and books and reading and things that I thought were really essential for strengthening our democracy. We know that readers are more likely to volunteer, to be active in their communities, and to vote. So I really felt like the strength of our democracy depended on creating a literate population. And how could we do that? You know, I, as a teacher, certainly tried. Parents try to create readers, but you know, all the forces in our society are against reading. There are all these other forms of entertainment, things you can do with your time. And surveys had shown that young people, weren't even reading a single book for pleasure in a year. So I thought, like, how can we find a way to make reading and books and words cool again? And that's what I thought MoMath was doing with math. And so that was how I came to this idea of creating a museum of language arts. So then, you know, the next thing that I had to do was find a building for this concept. And I looked at a lot of commercial real estate, but ended up responding to a request for proposals from the city of the District of Columbia for the Franklin School. And you can see that on the first slide. It was a National Historic Landmark building in the heart of downtown DC, and it had been abandoned for 10 years. it was rotting, basically. Inside, one time when I visited, it was actually raining inside the building. And I think I have a slide that shows just how disastrous the interior was. The paint was lead paint, so there were hazardous material problems, lead paint flakes everywhere, black mold, pigeons were flying in the attic, leaving pigeon droppings all over. And so, the first thing we had to do was abate the hazardous materials. And I had to, hire architects and a general contractor. And the companies that I ended up working with were experienced at historic renovation. Because the Franklin School is a National Historic Landmark, there were very strict restrictions on what you could do with the building. You couldn't touch the exterior, and even the interiors were protected, which is hard to believe when you see what a disaster, they looked like inside. So a lot of changes and bad things had happened to the building before it was designated a National Historic Landmark building. But so I took that on, and I was chosen by the city because I had the financial wherewithal to see this project through. There had been other proposals for reusing the building, but the city wasn't sure that those would-be developers had the money, and I had the passion, and I had this idea of using the Franklin School to create a museum of words and language, and the city really liked that idea too. They wanted this building that had been a place of education to continue that legacy. And so they really liked the idea of a museum of words and language. So the Franklin School had been a school from 1869 to the 1920s. And then it was the offices of the district's Board of Education. And then it was a homeless shelter. And then it was abandoned for 10 years. And so that was the state I found it in. But it was a National Historic Landmark building because the architecture was so special. The architect, Adolf Kloos, is known in Washington for designing other important red brick buildings. And in the case of the Franklin School in particular, he believed that poor children should be able to go to school in a place that was as beautiful as rich children. So he added all these embellishments to the Franklin School that make it particularly beautiful and special. He also believed that a lot of light and air circulation helped students learn. And so 150 years later, we know that he was right. And so the windows, we have 14-foot windows, we have 22-foot high ceilings, and air shafts that are original to the building that brought fresh air in, and we are reusing those in the renovation because that technology still works. So a second reason that the Franklin School is a National Historic Landmark building is because in 1880, Alexander Graham Bell did a successful experiment from the rooftop of the building, sending a message using light waves to his colleague. So basically, the Franklin School is also the birthplace of wireless communication. And he called his invention the photophone. He also invented the telephone, as you know. But at the time, he said that the photophone invention was more important than the telephone. And he was right. I mean, wireless is more important to us today. And he predicted in 1880, he said, someday people on ships at sea will be able to send messages to each other. So he knew how important this was. And so the Franklin School is a double National Historic Landmark building, but it was being left to just rot away until the city held this RFP, and we were awarded a 99-year lease for $10 a year in return for renovating the building. And so that is what happened. And in this slide that you might see that has our sign, our tagline is the museum where language comes to life. And that's what we're trying to do. Use this museum to bring words and language to life, and to do that with a lot of technology and innovations. So now I'm going to show some slides of our galleries. They were developed from a list of about 200 ideas that I had for concepts of, if you're going to have a museum about words and language, what should you show people? And we hired an exhibit design firm in New York City called Local Projects, who are known for using technology in their experience design firm. And I told them, what ideas I had, and then they took those ideas and matched them to the spaces in the building to create our galleries. And we have 10 major galleries, and then we have other exhibits that are sort of scattered throughout those galleries, but basically 10 major galleries that fit on 3 floors of the building. One floor, the top floor, is where you would start your visit, and it's devoted to where words come from, how we acquire language, and the origins of words in English, and the diversity of the world's languages. The second floor is devoted to what we can do with words creatively. And the bottom floor is about the power of words. In this first slide, it shows a snapshot of our first most important gallery called Where Do Words Come From? And we built a 40-foot wide, 22-foot tall, talking 3-dimensional word wall. It's built out of 1,000 words, and the word wall talks to you, talks to the visitors, and they respond and learn a lot about etymology and the history of the English language. The most important concept that we want visitors to leave with is that our language is always changing. That there was never a time when English was fixed and immutable and perfect, and it's all been downhill since then. We don't have an academy like the French do. English is alive and evolving, and we celebrate that fact at Planet Word. We want to make sure that whoever visits feels welcome, no matter how they use the English language. We don't want them to be intimidated by rules and this is good grammar and this isn't. And so linguists have a label for that. We're a descriptive language museum. We describe how people use language in real life. We're not prescriptive. In other words, we don't say, this is right, this is wrong, this is how you should talk or write. So when I first set out to plan the museum, a lot of people said, oh, are you going to have, exhibits on diagramming sentences and grammar? And so I said, sorry, no, it's the exact opposite. That is not what we want to do. It's a free museum, and we don't want any barriers to entry. We don't want anyone to say, oh, I'm not good at English. I don't like to read. I'm not going to go to Planet Word because it's not for me. Actually, it is for everybody, and it's fun, and there's no right or wrong. You're just learning and laughing. So the next slide shows our big, huge gallery, the biggest one, and it's called the Spoken World. It's in a very spacious room called the Great Hall. It was the assembly room for the original Franklin School. And you can see on the walls, there are fresco designs. We replicated the original frescoes. Those are the exact designs and the colors that were used back in 1869. And in the middle of the gallery, we hung a 12-foot diameter globe that's covered with 4,800 LEDs. And what happens in this gallery, and you can see the people standing at iPads circling the globe. On each iPad, we have language ambassadors who teach short, interesting mini lessons about different languages. And the iPads are arranged around the globe in geographical order. And people talk, visitors talk to the language ambassador on each iPad, whichever one they go up to, and learn a little mini lesson about a language. And then at the end of the mini lesson, the iPad says, look up. And when you look up, the globe is taken over with a design that matches the lesson you've just been learning about. So it's hard to describe, but for instance, our Hebrew ambassador, she teaches a lesson about the chet sound in Hebrew using the example of l'chaim, the toast that you give in Hebrew to life. And when she comes to that part of the lesson and it says, look up, when you look up at the globe, you see the LEDs light up like two champagne glasses. You hear the glasses clink together, and it's just sort of a positive reinforcement that you tried learning a foreign language and pronouncing some of that language. Because Planet Word is a voice-activated museum, so we have many, many galleries where you're talking and you're saying things, and then the museum is reacting. So in this case, we have 30 different languages on the iPads, and when you try to say things, you're responding to the language ambassador, and it's very rewarding. Nobody says, oh no, that was terrible, you should just speak English, forget, it's very encouraging. And you have, this wonderful, fun surprise at the end where the globe lights up in response to what you are talking about. On the second floor, where all the galleries are devoted to what you can do with words, we have a gallery called Unlock the Music. It's about songwriting techniques, and it's a karaoke style lounge. where the mics are live, and you can choose a song from our playlist, and the words appear on a screen in front of you, just like in a karaoke bar, but they're annotated. And so you are reading, along with the words to the song, you can read about the techniques of the songwriter and what they're doing to make the song memorable, what kind of rhyming techniques. So everything at Planet Word is fun and social, but it's also meaningful. And you're learning something. Whether you realize it or not, you should come away from Planet Word knowing a lot more about language than you did when you walked in. One of our favorite, most successful galleries is tiny. It's called Word Worlds. And there our exhibit designers designed these smart paintbrushes. And so in the gallery, you're surrounded by a panorama of a mountain scene, a meadow scene, and an urban backdrop. And when you pick up one of these magic paintbrushes and dip it into a word palette and start painting the walls around you, they're transformed according to the definition of that word. So I don't know if you can see autumnal at the bottom of the screen. If you dipped your brush into autumnal and started painting the scene around you, it would turn into fall colors. And so every word is beautiful and does something unique when you paint with it. And the backdrop around you is transformed. So one of the words is hibernal. When you paint with hibernal, everything is snowy and the water freezes and the bird flying overhead turns into a snowy owl. And it's just beautiful and fun like that. And we've had kids come back, 4 times with their parents because they just want to paint. And it's sort of the most fun you can have learning vocabulary. And then another important gallery is called the library. And here we really do live up to our tagline, where a language comes to life. When you take books off the shelves and place them in special holders, it triggers projection about the book. And so, each one of 49 books that are on display come to life in different ways. You hear and see little excerpts or précis about the book, just enough to make you want to read that book. And so the best thing that happens to me at the museum is when people come up and say, where can I buy this book? And we actually sell all the books in the library in our gift shop. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just, interest people enough that they'll want to go read or write or run for student government and give speeches, just use their words and enjoy them. And here on the next slide, you can see how Jason Reynolds' book, Long Way Down, comes to life. It's narrated by Jason, who is the National Ambassador for Children's Literature for the Library of Congress. But he is on our advisory board, and he actually narrated a bit about his book, Long Way Down, and why he wrote it, and about the subject matter and why it's so important to him. So I've talked for a long time, and I'm going to stop there and let Janet ask questions. And I hope that that little sampling of what's in store at Planet Word makes you all want to come and visit.
I'm already planning my trip, Ann. Thank you so much for that. You mentioned one of your advisors. You have a very impressive board of directors and an advisory board that is just filled, chock-a-block full with very influential people. I'm wondering, as you were, this idea of Planet Word was sort of kept becoming a reality in your mind, how did you inspire people to want to participate with you in this venture? Because
I know
it's an amazing
really
idea.
amazing. You know, I am just so devoted and grateful to all these people who believed, oh, this is a really cool idea. And I'm going to give money to it, or I'm going to lend my name and credibility, like Jason Reynolds. You know, he's this accomplished author, very busy, now going all over the United States for the Library of Congress. But he just loved the idea of a museum about books and words and language. And he met me at a Starbucks, you know, near the museum. And we talked about the idea. And he was like, okay, fine. You know, I'll be on your advisory board. And I basically never had a person who said no, they would not be on the advisory board, which is why I have such a big advisory board. Of course, I did have people who said they wouldn't be donors, or at least at the level that I was hoping. But we had a lot of really generous donors and board members who just love the idea, who love words and language, and it is not represented in all these museums in Washington, D.C. There is nothing devoted to words and language the way, you know, I was talking about.
Right. You opened Planet Word during the pandemic, and the hours posted on your website are still Thursday through Saturday. Do you envision the time when you can open fully, and is the idea to be open 7 days a week, or how do you expand those hours, and what's the process?
So actually, I hope that the website says Thursday through Sunday, because we added Sunday quite a while ago, maybe 2 months ago, and holiday Mondays. The idea is eventually to be open 7 days a week, but right now, when we need to have events, like event rentals are subsidizing our operations. So we can't add staff to have a 7 day a week operation at a free museum until we have that event rental business going full strength.
Right.
But it's starting. We've had our second wedding in the last week, and we have bookings all through next year, you know, so things are looking up.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Were you happy with the launch? Did it come off? Did the opening of the museum go the way you wanted it to go?
Oh,
and
yeah.
what was the most surprising part of your public response?
Well, the public launch was virtual. So, you know, that was not what I planned about or dreamed of. We had a whole launch scheduled for May 31st in person at the museum. We had a singer-songwriter who was coming, who had written this whole song about words, and we had all sorts of people who were coming. But in fact, you know, our virtual celebration that was done, you know, pre-recorded, was nice because we could hear from people like Barack Obama, people who had helped me and contributed financially or getting me speeches in his case, finding how I could get access to a famous speech that he gave. So all those people got to be part of the opening celebration. And if it had been real and live and in person in Washington, they wouldn't have been here. So that was pretty special. Surprising, I was more gratified than surprised that people did love what we had created from the very first day. And I was just so relieved. It's like, okay, I thought it was really cool, but now I have the, approval of all these other people who will tell their friends and come back.
So I have a practical question. As you're talking about how much of the museum is voice activated and of local response, does it get noisy in there from time to time?
So we started off allowing 35 people per hour enter the museum, and that was not noisy. And so we went up to 50 people per hour because we could see that we could handle it and the visitor experience wasn't worsened by increasing the numbers. And then we saw that we could handle 50, so we went up to 70, and now we're up to 100 reservations per hour. Now, part of the reason that we can handle that is because it's a free museum, so people don't show up, even though they registered, and it's really hard to get a time slot. They're taken very quickly after, we put them up for reservations on the first of every month for the month to come. But regardless, people don't show up, and so we take a lot of walk-ins, and it's never been so crowded that it's too noisy, or you can't see, or you can't participate the way we wanted. So I think it's okay.
Do people have to leave after an hour, or do they get to stay as long as they want?
No, they can stay as long as they want. We had one mother and daughter who were determined to try out all the 30 languages in the spoken word gallery. So they were there for 6 hours. They left for lunch and came back, but we're open 10 to 5, and they were there all day long. And they were so tired at the end, they were sitting on the floor. But they experienced it's really 28 languages and 2 sign languages.
Well, they got the whole way around the world, it sounds like.
Yeah, they did.
Your mission statement on the website also lists your core values, which are fun, playful, unexpected, motivational, meaningful, and inclusive. That's an amazing assortment of things for a museum to try to be. Do you feel like you're hitting the mark on all of them? Because it certainly seems from this side that you are.
So those are our core values, but that doesn't mean that every single activity has to hit all 6. So they always have to be inclusive, and they always have to be meaningful. Some are fun and playful, some are unexpected, and some are motivational, but they're always inclusive and they're always meaningful. There's nothing silly. We're not going to waste your time on something that you don't have to know about, words and language.
You talk about bringing language to life, and you talked about the ideas that you had for the different galleries. Do other people on your board or your advisory board or guests throw ideas at you that every now and then you go, I'm going to have to remember that one for some time down the road? Do you take suggestions?
Our museum really has 10 galleries, and 10 experiences. And there isn't room for a temporary exhibit, not to mention money. I'd have to go raise the money to do something temporary. So what we're doing is that's where the auditorium comes in and the classrooms. For additional ideas that aren't so foundational, we can have speakers and we can have workshops and address those other subjects that way. Now, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, until last week, we had never had an in-person event in our auditorium. But John McWhorter, the linguist, who's now writing also for the New York Times, he insisted on coming in person. And so he came and we had a sold out event, 150 seats in our auditorium, and 150 people bought tickets to come hear John McWhorter talk about his latest book called 9 Nasty Words, which was so much fun. And so it so hit the sweet spot of Planet Word, you know, sort of unexpected and meaningful. You know, he's a real linguist, and his scholarship about nasty words was really interesting. And so that's where we'll do the additional programs. But what's in our galleries, for the most part, is going to stay there for a while.
Okay. You might not want to answer this question because it might be giving away a secret, but I'm going to ask anyway. Which of the galleries is your favorite in your museum?
It's not a secret. No, the library is my favorite. It's beautiful, and we have lots of ways of bringing language to life in the library, and I think it's where I can honestly say we brought language to life. So we have 49 books that all come to life in totally different new ways. We have dioramas that we commissioned from 9 artists that come to life behind gold framed mirrors. It's very surprising. Nobody knows they're there. We have a poetry nook where we have 50 fantastic poems for all ages, from all eras, that just loop. They're read by 4 different poets and readers who, it's just a contemplative space. You close the door, nobody knows you're in there, if you can find the secret door. So we have a secret door to our poetry nook, and it's a beautiful space.
I think that the museum sounds like it's ideally suited for field trips, and that might not be happening because of COVID restrictions. I am assuming you envision that happening moving forward.
We do. We've had a couple. Our local elementary school sent all their students who were in-person learners last May. So they were able to come because the District of Columbia said, if you can walk for a field trip, you can go on one. Oh. So they walked the 2 blocks from their school to Planet Word. But otherwise, we developed virtual field trips that we're giving all over the United States. So they're related to our galleries and things you would see at Planet Word, but they're virtual, and so they're different. It's a field trip to sort of give a teacher a break and for students to learn something about words and language, but it's not like a trip to Planet Word. You're not visiting the galleries.
What are the target ages, would you say, for Planet Word? I know it sounds like to me that it doesn't really matter. You can be any age and you're going to find something there. But in your teacher mind, did you have sort of a sweet spot that you were trying to hit?
So it's really our exhibit designers who insisted that we have an age range, that they said, we can't just design a museum for everybody. Let's be specific here. So we settled on 10 to 12-year-olds and above. And that was really important because what happens at that age? You either sort of become a lifelong reader or you leave it behind a bit. So we felt like 10 to 12-year-olds, they're becoming adolescents, they're going into middle school, they have the possibility for empathy. That's really important when you're listening to how other people talk, listening to yourself talk and hearing the words that you use. So we felt like it was this important age to capture. So what that means is that the vocabulary that we use, that the level of discussion is geared towards that level. But we have very sophisticated discussions in our exhibits about etymology or dialect, taboo language, forensic linguistics. We don't hold back. We're not shy about discussing any of these topics, but still we gear it to be fun for 10 to 12-year-olds and above. Now, we've got a lot of little kids who are coming. Parents are bringing 4-year-olds and, and even the little ones find things to relate to and to do and have fun and ask to come back. It was never intended to be for non-readers, but they like painting. They like the books that come to life, just looking at the magic of what happens captures them.
Well, and that will contribute to them being readers until they're at least 10 or 12.
Yes, I sure hope so.
How many paid employees do you have, and is there a volunteer component to the Planet Word staff?
We have 13 full-time employees, soon to probably go up to 15. Maybe we have 14 as of Monday because we just hired somebody new. But we don't have any volunteers yet because, we have Word associates who are part-time, sort of docents and visitor services. And they are doing a lot of the important playing those roles right now. So we haven't started with a volunteer program. We need to make sure that people show up, that they are taking their roles seriously. So we're paying our Word associates and eventually we'll need volunteers, but volunteers cannot do the jobs that people are paid for. You can't mix. Right. So we'd have to have a very distinct role for volunteers, and we don't have that yet.
Your website is a brilliant sort of interpretation of your museum. Whoever developed it did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
One of it takes the idea of dynamic language right onto your screen. And my favorite part is the surprise me button in the lower right corner. I go back on every now and then just to see if I can get surprised again. So here's the question. How often are you going to change those little fun facts and riddles and so on and so forth?
I don't know. We have that one new employee is someone who will be monitoring the website, changing out some of the pictures that are on there now that are old renderings for actual photos of event spaces and things that we now have. So, maybe then we'll change out the surprise me buttons.
Do you expect the events that you hold there to be basically academic events, or do you see that? I mean, is it still a good place to have a wedding, or a good place to have a cocktail party?
Yeah, and we've already had those. And, in Washington, a lot of people need event spaces for meetings and luncheons. And so we hope just to be an interesting venue for that. We have the White House Fellows coming in about 3 weeks. And, we've had the National Puzzlers League that Will Short's brought, so those are people who are especially infatuated with words, right. But, it can be anybody.
Going back to the process of turning the dilapidated Franklin School into this amazing visual miracle, I'm wondering, how did you pick which architectural and engineering teams to work with? Because it seems like that had to be a huge part of the process.
I hired a project manager early on who took me to interview different architecture firms. And the one that I ended up hiring actually had a lot of historical knowledge about the Franklin School, had done proposals for its renovation previously, and they had a really great idea that really was the reason why I wanted to hire them. So the Franklin School, like I said, is a National Historic Landmark. But what the historic preservation authorities really care about is the front facade of the building, so that when people see it face on, they see the original building as intended. And our architects suggested that we change the entry to the museum, not use the front of the building that had 2 steep flights of stairs that were not accessible, and to turn the entry around to the back of the building and make an accessible entrance there. And there, the historic preservation authorities did allow us to break through windows on the back of the building and create a new vestibule entrance. We also, we paved over the rear garden that was 14 feet down from street level. So that created this new terrace at the level of the first floor entryway, and captured all the space underneath as sort of back of house, staff break room, a conference room, security, mechanical spaces. So those are under our new outdoor, terrace. And so it was that great idea that led me to hire those particular architects, Fire Blinder Bell. And then the contractors, I interviewed, with the project manager, different contractors, and picked on the basis of the proposal and how much they would charge. And they also used Whiting Turner, and they also have done a lot of historic preservation work. So they knew the vendors who could deal with the hazmats and with the cast iron and, removing the lead and repainting and restoring the ceramic tiles on the stairs. They knew who I should contact for those
Fascinating. It's an amazing project, a great accomplishment. Congratulations. It's a fabulous legacy for anybody to leave behind. What's your next project, Ann?
Improving my golf game.
Okay.
That will make my husband very happy.
Well, then you might beat him.
That will never happen, but at least I could keep up.
Do you see Planet Word in a city other than Washington? Do you think that it's a concept that could be taken to New York or Atlanta? Or, I mean, not the exact same, but the idea of a language museum?
Parts of it definitely could be recreated if you have the money and the willpower. I wanted Planet Word to be in Washington, though, for a real reason. I mean, we are a country that is built on a written constitution. Words are inscribed all over Washington, D.C., and all of our memorials. And I just felt like it had to be here. I wanted people to leave a visit to Planet Word thinking about how they use words, what they mean, just being more empathetic, go out on the streets. And we live in a multicultural society now. You know, we should appreciate the languages that we hear around us and where all these immigrants have come from and the richness that they bring and that their languages bring to our lives. So for me, Planet Word belonged in Washington. It's here for a reason. I'm trying to make a little statement about words and American democracy.
Very well said. Very well said. But I also have to point out that earlier in this conversation tonight, you said that Planet Word was all about learning and laughing. And I wrote it down because I think that is a charming combination and a huge draw for people to want to go have a good time exploring the excitement of words.
And especially coming out of a pandemic. Let's hope we're coming out of it, because we're also isolated. And so I'm glad that I could provide a relatively safe space for people to come together and laugh and have fun and, you know, just lift people's spirits a little bit.
There's no doubt that that's what must happen when you walk through those doors, and I can't wait to walk through them myself. But I'm going to have to get online and make my appointment early. I can hear.
I'll get you in. You have a little in with me.
I have a poll. I have a little free pass. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is pretty. Unless I've missed asking you any questions, if there's any last thought that is in your head that you would like to share with our audience, which is primarily the book publishing industry, the people that make the books, that use all those words, that create the boring old books that you have to turn the pages in and they don't come to life except in your mind. But if you have any last message for them, I'm happy.
They make our lives richer, and, you know, Planet Word is not trying to say that's in the past. We are celebrating actual books and reading and writing and speaking and listening, using words in all different ways. And so we do use a lot of technology, but it's not to, you know, overcome works on pages. It's to celebrate them.
That's very well said, and thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us this evening. It's so exciting to hear about this immersive language experience, and I'm going to be down there before you know it.
Okay.
Thank you to the audience who have attended the program tonight. Be sure and check out the website at planetword.org.
Yes.
And while you're online, go ahead and look at the NewYorkBookForum.org again too, because we're always adding new material to the website. And once again, I must thank the devoted and dedicated board of directors at the New York Book Forum for their endless support as we introduce this new organization into the world of publishing. Watch your emails on our website for information on future programs. Thank you for attending. Have a lovely evening. And once again, Ann, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.